What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Just going to be me here today, but I got some wide receivers I think you should target and some wide receivers I think you should avoid in this year's draft. We're going to go through the list based off of how likely I think I am to be right. So we'll start off with some of the ones that I'm 100% right on. And then as we get into the video, we'll get into some of my hotter takes. So starting off with a wide receiver I 100% think you need to target in this year's draft is going to be Ladd McConkey. Right now, he's projected around wide receiver 20 off of the board. I think he's going to be a top 12 wide receiver this year. Chargers offense as a whole has a huge opportunity to take a step forward. You've got Justin Herbert entering the season healthy. The offensive line is looking a lot healthier. And you have Mike McDaniel at offensive coordinator this year. And he runs an offense built around motion, creating separation, getting the playmakers the ball in space. I think that's an offensive system that really fits Ladd McConkey's play style. Right, he's really good when he gets the ball in space, and he's really good at getting yards after the catch. And so I think that's going to benefit him a lot. You also have Keenan Allen leaving, right? And he commanded around a 22% target share last year. Obviously, all of those opportunities aren't going to go towards Ladd McConkey, but we know he's Justin Herbert's most trusted target. He had a great 2024 season, and I think the majority of those opportunities will go towards Ladd McConkey. So I think, if his weekly target volume does increase and the Chargers offense improves overall, I think we're not just hoping he becomes wide receiver one. I think we have a legitimate path to him getting there. And the fact is you're going to be able to draft him at wide receiver two value, and you're going to be able to get a second wide receiver one value out of him this year. All right, moving on to a wide receiver I think you need to avoid in this year's draft. I'm actually going to go with two. I'm going to go with both Bears wide receivers, Rome Odunze and Luther Burden. Honestly, it has nothing to do with them as a player, but has everything to do with just how the Bears run an offense. There's not a lot of consistency in their game plan. And it's not a bad thing. I think the offense is going to perform very well this year. But Ben Johnson, I mean, he changes the game plan a lot. It's very different each week. It's going to be what they need to do to win that game. It's very volatile. It's very diverse, right? One week they're going to run the ball a lot. Caleb Williams is going to run the ball. He's going to have 200 or less passing yards. I also don't think we're going to get a true wide receiver one out of these two. I think that their target volume is going to be very inconsistent. One week it's going to be Rome, one week it's going to be Luther, one week it's going to be Colton Loveland, right? And I look at that. There's not really a safe floor with either of these guys. I understand like Luther. I mean, his yards per reception were very good. Rome Odunze had some big games. Now, if one of these guys goes down, that's a completely different story. But right now, there's too much volatility in this offense. They run the ball too much, right? You're also dealing with a team where, they play in a division where you get a lot of bad weather, right? And, I just think, maybe they will have week to week value. There will be certain matchups, right? Like I said, if one of them's out one week, Rome or Luther, they're a clear flex option, I think, in my opinion, but I don't think they're week to week guys for me, and they're plug and play. And, I just look at overall projections here, and just some of these guys that are coming in after them, right? You have DJ Moore, and while I don't think he is super relevant outside of a flex option, I think we're going to see consistent target share from him, right? In fact, I'd rather take a gamble on Marvin Harrison Jr. I'd even take a gamble on someone like Alec Pierce, just ahead of Luther or Rome Odunze. Especially Alec Pierce. We'll get to Alec Pierce in a little bit. But below that, there's not a lot of guys I necessarily take over them, but I just think that there's a little bit more. I think that they're both projected, like especially Luther. There's a lot of hype around Luther Burden, and I just don't want people to get caught up in drafting him as like a breakout sleeper. It's not going to happen. He's not going to get a consistent enough target share. Moving on to my next wide receiver, I think you should target. Another guy that I'm absolutely certain on this year is Emeka Egbuka. Obviously, we saw his upside at the start of last season. Averaged 20 points per game his first 5 games. Fell apart after that. Got hurt. Averaged around 8 points per game his last 12, but I don't think he was playing fully healthy, right? The Bucks needed him to be in the game, right? They're on the fringe of making the playoffs. Everyone else on the team was hurt as well. But coming into this season healthy, Mike Evans is out of the picture, and his only competition for targets is Chris Godwin, who's 30 years old. A lot of injury risk with him. I think Egbuka is going to have a very, very heavy target rate this year. I know the 50% catch rate's a little bit of a concern as well. But like I said, I mean, he was, I think he was not playing fully healthy. But you're going to get a huge volume out of him. You're going to get a lot of consistency. You're going to get a pretty safe floor this year, right? He's going to finish the season higher than he's projected. So yeah, seriously, target Emeka this year. Another wide receiver I think you need to avoid is Garrett Wilson. Now, I know he's extremely talented, and I still think he's going to have good fantasy value this year. I think his cost is too high. And I think there's a lot of wide receivers that are projected to go below him that I would rather take. And really with Garrett, it's not him. It's all because of Geno Smith. And I could be biased because I'm a Raiders fan and I had to watch that bullshit last season. You know, he was very accurate. I mean, he had like a 71% completion percentage with the Seahawks in 2024. So it's a little bit of a wild card with what we're going to get with Geno Smith, but the offensive line is not projected to be very good. We know Geno Smith doesn't perform well under pressure, right? He's not the most mobile quarterback. He's a little bit older. I also think when you add Kenny and Sadiq into the mix, I think he's going to take a hit into Garrett Wilson's target share. I'm actually really high on Kenny and Sadiq. Just overall, I don't know if this is going to be his season, but I think we look 2 or 3 years down the road. I think Sadiq's going to be a top tight end in the league. Right. I mean, he's a tight end that has, wide receiver skills. And I think he's going to take a big hit into Garrett Wilson's target share this year. And the Jets are going to need to do that in order to have any kind of success on offense. So I see Garrett Wilson, smaller target share, bad quarterback, bad offensive line. I worry his value is going to be very far below his cost. And, just looking here at some of the wide receivers projected to go below him. Right, you've got AJ Brown, who I think is going to have a great season this year. Right? We've got George Pickens, Ted McMillan. Not as high on Ted McMillan this year. I think they're going to share the ball a lot in that offense, actually. But you got Devontae Smith. You got Emeka Egbuka. You've got Ladd McConkey, Devontae Adams. He's got a lot of touchdown upside. So there's a lot of wide receivers that are projected to go below him. I would save that pick in the draft and skip on Garrett Wilson this year. All right, now we're going to start getting into some of my hotter takes here. Wide receiver that I think you need to target is actually going to be Alec Pierce. I think Alec Pierce actually has a really good opportunity to have a breakout season. I know a lot of people are very worried about the ankle injury that's been limiting him in training camp so far. But the way I look at it is the Colts paid him a ton of money. They expect him to be, or they want him to be the wide receiver one. They're going to be careful with him, right? Now with Michael Pittman out of the picture, right, there's more targets to go around between Alec Pierce and Josh Downs. And I think Pierce is in a better position to get the majority of those targets. You look at his numbers as wide receiver 2 last season, right? He still had 1,000 receiving yards and he averaged 21.3 yards per reception. And I look at those numbers and, right, you add another 3 or 4 or 5 targets per week for him. I think he has a really good opportunity to have a monster season. With that said, too, Josh Downs, I think he's going to have some week-to-week upside moving forward as well. I know some people are high on him. I like him. I think he's going to be like a week-to-week flex. But yeah, target Alec Pierce this year. I think he's got a really good opportunity to have a breakout season. All right, another wide receiver I think you need to avoid in this year's draft is going to be Zay Flowers. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a more unpopular opinion. And really my issue with him here is really more due to his cost. I think he's being drafted at his ceiling right now. And in order for him to reach his ceiling, I think the Ravens' passing offense needs to take another step forward. But I think it's taken a step backward, right? You lose your all-pro center. John Harbaugh is gone. Lamar Jackson, he's not been the most reliable, injury risk-wise. And it's also an offense that's really run-heavy, right? I think Derrick Henry has a chance to have a little bit of a better season this year. Right? And if Lamar Jackson's fully healthy, he's going to run the ball. Now Zay Flowers, he's still going to have his good weeks. He's still going to have a lot of fantasy value, but just with his cost so high, I would try and avoid him. Take another high-end running back, right? Because like I said, you've got Ladd McConkey, you've got Emeka Egbuka, you've got Devontae Adams, a bunch of guys, even Devontae Smith, right? He's projected to go like right behind Zay Flowers. All guys that I think just are going to have way more consistency and way more upside than Zay Flowers is going to have this year. All right, another wide receiver I think you absolutely need to target, and I'm honestly really confident about him, is going to be Parker Washington. He's on my breakout radar this season. From what I'm seeing, Parker Washington, he's the clear wide receiver 1 in Jacksonville, and he's clearly Trevor Lawrence's most trusted target. I know you got Jacoby Myers in the mix. I know you got Brian Thomas Jr. in the mix, but after the season that BTJ had last season, I don't think Trevor Lawrence is going to trust him this year. I don't think Jacoby Myers is going to take away too much from Parker's targets. I don't think those guys are going to limit his ceiling at all. You look at his season last year, last 3 games, had at least 9 targets and 19 fantasy points in all those games, averaged 14 yards per reception, and received well over 100 yards in 2 out of those 3 games, right? You also look at the AFC wildcard game. He had 12 targets and 107 yards and a touchdown, right? So big game that mattered. Trevor Lawrence really relied on Parker Washington. Right now he's being valued as wide receiver 35 and as a flex option. I mean, dude, he's going to be an absolute steal. He's going to be like a clear wide receiver too. I think he might average 20 points per game this year. I feel really confident about him right now. So please make sure you target Parker Washington in the late rounds this year. He's going to be a steal.